So you weight a little bit forwards, hips dropping back, just releasing a little bit from the lower part of your back, because I suppose also from your belly at the front, any kind of stiffness around there, around that whole area really, is going to prevent the pelvis from just making little adjustments. It tells you your pelvis works almost like a gyroscope. You know, whichever way the body goes, your pelvis will sort of adjust to try and keep you upright a little bit. And you know, mostly those are quite small movements. This is why sometimes if you're sitting in a chair that's got a slope on it or something like that, you can end up being a bit stiff in your back because you know, the chair might be angling you downwards or something like that, and you're trying to unconsciously adjust to come upright. Nice smooth movement, nice steady rhythm. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. Feel what's happening up to your back, either side of your spine, into your shoulders. Arms swinging freely from your shoulders. And then raising your arms. One foot forwards. Just a gentle push from each foot. Feeling the center of your body respond with the turning movement. When you've done that for a little while, you might want to change that around. So rather than thinking about a push from the leg, think that you know, as you turn, when you turn towards the foot, that takes your weight into that leg. So if you're on the front leg and you turn towards the back leg, you move. Yeah, I mean, the real movement is a combination of these things. It's a bit chicken and eggish. Some movements will tend to emphasize the sort of push from the ground. Others will tend to emphasize the turn in the center. And that's particularly true of Tai Chi forms. And it can also vary, not just from exercise to exercise, but from time to time, depending on where you're putting your intent. And then on the other side, no one way of describing these exercises, no one image, no amount of technical detail, no idea about what's going on in the exercise is ever going to give you the full exercise, the full picture. So, you know, if we concentrate on one aspect of it, that can be quite useful, but we don't want to get stuck on that and still be doing it the same way in 5 years' time or something like that, or even in 5 days' time. Eventually, we by using these ideas and images and so on, we learn to focus in a particular way, but then to go beyond it. It's a bit like if you listen to a piece of music, you might listen to one of the instruments or the rhythm, or if there's a song, then the singer or something like that, and that will be highlighted. But at some other point, you might hear the whole piece as a unified whole. And so, that's ultimately what we want to try and do with things like Tai Chi. Another example might be if you have a car or a bike or something like that, and you take it apart to clean it up and maintain it. That can be a useful thing to do. But of course, if you take a bike apart and it's, the wheels are off and so on and so forth, it may be very clean, but it's not much use because you can't ride it until you put it back together. So it depends on exactly where you are in your own practice and what ideas come up in classes and so on and so forth. So come into standing, and then letting your hips sink back, feeling that adjustment of the pelvis, and push up. What you should feel, come a bit closer, just here where the leg meets the torso. There's a like a kind of valley. It's called the Kwa. KWA, which I think just means valley in Chinese. And when we sink down, that gets quite deep and narrow. And when we push up, it opens out a little bit. Which you won't do if you do this. It doesn't happen in the same way, because what we do here is this, and the pelvis tucks under. And so you can get, it can be quite interesting to look at what's happening in that area. Some systems in Tai Chi got a huge emphasis on it. On what we refer to as the opening and closing of the Kwa. Now, hands cradling the ball, pushing up and sinking. And then the wild goose. And parting the crowds. One more time. And then dragon plucks the stars from the sky. More on each side. And pushing in 4 directions. So when we turn, again, we get that what's referred to as opening and closing in the croix. So when I turn to my right, on this side, it becomes very narrow and deep, and that's the closing. On this side, it becomes very open. Another thing it's a good indication of is what's happening in your legs. So I'm going to come a bit closer. You'll miss my arms, but you'll know what the arms are doing. So when I turn, if this happens, can you see how my legs are moving? That's wrong, by the way. You really don't want to do that. You want to keep your knees pointing forwards. But it does mean that the croix won't open and close so much. If I get it right, then it won't be on this one. My knees will stay pointing in the same direction, because what I'm doing is, as my knee gets pulled around, I'm deliberately rotating it out again. One more round. And trying to make the turn without twisting your legs up. And then circling palms. So your knees, with 1 or 2 exceptions, will always stay pointing and above, pointing in the same direction as your toes, and in line, sort of above the toes. Swimming dragon is one obvious exception. It's the only one I can think of at the moment, actually. And then add in the turn. It's not to say that the legs are stiff, and there will be slight sense of movement, But what shouldn't happen here, for instance, is this, that apart from anything else, it twists my body up. And as soon as my knees go out of line, it's like the foundation of the house slipping. Everything gets disrupted at that point. And then switch sides. So this is something, this is an aspect of posture that I don't emphasize too much to start off with, but as we develop in these arts, and really as we want more from them and we're putting more into them, it's important to take on board that aspect of the knee, because otherwise, every time you do these movements, every time you turn, you're going to be straining your knees. So add the turn this time if it's comfortable. It's another example of where we really should not be moving too far. With this one, when you turn to the front, face forwards. Don't get to here and then look over there. Feel out with your hand. Good, and then rowing a boat. And then polishing the table. Remember, hips, base of the spine, going back as your hands go forwards, and going, swinging around in the opposite direction to your hands, head and shoulders. One more time. Understand. Shake out. Let's think about the knees. I know I've mentioned it before. You know, when we're in the bow stance, this can happen very easily. That back knee coming in when we're forwards can happen a little bit on the front leg as well. It helps if we maintain this posture, that slight curve there. That curve reinforces the strength of the leg. But what we want to be able to do, as I move from back to front, for instance, here, you can see my legs come out of line. I push the knee forwards and I rotate it outwards. And that's brought it back in line with the back foot. It's pointing in the same direction as the back foot. And the point is that those things should happen at the same time as I move forwards. So what you shouldn't see is this and this, although you may see it sometimes. It's a stretch on the inside of the leg and a contraction on the outside of the leg. If you don't do that, you lose a lot of the strength in Tai Chi, and a lot of the stability as well, because those things are very much related. So just bearing that in mind, transferring from side to side. And the same thing here. It's not this. It's this. And all of this, if you're following this, means that you'll probably make smaller movements, less movement, which probably means you were moving too far before. It's encouraging, isn't it? Yeah. And just turning. We're going to go into bear play. Give yourself that little bit of a rolling movement. And just where the knee is in relation to the toes. And into bear play. And then turn out, hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. Here we see another way in which our knee remains in line with the toes, by which I mean in line with the direction that the toes are pointing in. Obviously with this one, because of the nature of it, it will look from the side as though the knee is overextending the toes, but here you should be able to look back and still see your toes poking out beyond your knees. But the direction is the same, and we get that. We actually let the foot turn. And then change into cow gazes at the moon. Here the foot has to turn even more, of course. Depends on how far you turn. And then straighten your feet up and circle. As much as possible with this, your weight stays 50% in each leg. Your hands, your arms go straight out from your shoulders. So this doesn't happen, this doesn't happen. It's the body turning. And then go back the other way. Okay, and then shake out. That last point I made, let me show you with this thing. This is Tai Chi ruler, Bong, B-A-N-G is the name of it. And you can see it's a specially shaped piece of wood. So this bulging bit in the middle, if I do this exercise with that, if you think of the center line of my body going from my nose down through where the zip is to my navel, that this center part of the stick stays in front of that line. I don't do this and this, and it goes up and down, but it stays relative to my body in the same position. This is true of most of the movements that we do. So when we do something like hitting the ball in front of the shoulder, for instance, my hand does this. It's not in front of the center line, it's in front of my shoulder. And then when I turn, this angle hasn't significantly changed. So if I can do that from here, you see there, my hand is still going out from my shoulder. It's not this. And again, there are exceptions to that. Those of you who've done a Tai Chi form, though, a sequence, there aren't exceptions to that. This is part of the very, very precise alignment that we look for in Tai Chi forms. So some people even go so far as to say that your hand would never cross the center line. I'm not so sure about that myself, but you know, it's certainly something to bear in mind if you're doing one of the Tai Chi forms. It's important too in these individual exercises, of course. I mentioned swimming dragon. Swimming dragon is the exception to a lot of those rules, but it's further from the Tai Chi forms than some of the exercises. So further from the martial aspect of it, but still has some interesting points, of course. So now just side to side, and here your knees will curve, because we're looking for that curve all the way through the body. And now it's there. A nice even curve. I may have done this before, but I'll show you with this there. The stick represents my center line, and so here, so there's the curve, and then here, there. You see it better if I bring my feet together, of course, because now it's there and it's there. Be very careful with this movement of your knees. So with feet together, with feet apart, whatever suits you best. Hands together, sinking down. And then go back the other way. Even here, your hands aren't moving far away from that curve. So it's like the center line of your body is curving. And your hands are following the curve of the center line. You can see here, they're not going any further out than my hips and my shoulders. Shake out. 1 foot forwards, transferring your weight. Make sure you take that little moment to pause over each leg so that you can feel this sort of draining away, this dissolving away, because we arrive in the leg and we're generally not quite there. We have to go from here, and there's just a sort of settling in period. While you're doing that, your empty leg, you apply just a very gentle pressure through the foot. Imagine you're doing this in the sea or something like that, and it's a sandy shore, and the sand keeps moving underneath you. And so what you want to do before you commit your weight, you want to make sure that you've still got some firm ground underneath you. So you're just testing the ground. Another image, you're on thin ice and you've got the foot there, but no weight in it or no significant weight. And you just test it to make sure that you're not going to fall through the ice. This is a really interesting exercise. It takes a while to develop, but it really improves your awareness of your feet and the contact between your feet and the ground. So it has a significant impact on your stability and your mobility. Not because you do this when you walk down the street, but simply because you've built that awareness. It does take a while to develop. It's hard to describe exactly what to do. It's hard to describe how you push down, which is why I use the images. But when I first came across this and began to think about it, it took me about 3 or 4 years of practicing this way before I felt that it was starting to integrate itself properly into my movements without me having to kind of think about it too much. I still practice it like this sometimes. And then your heel coming up. So again, this is partly a function of that alignment between your knee and your foot. That makes it quite easy. Lower the heel, press in, and let the weight follow. Here. Don't lock your knee back when you do this. Lower the ball of the foot, press in, let your weight follow. Don't come up. This is a very common problem. Your toes and your heel coming up are really just kind of knee, ankle, they're part of this, but not your shoulders. You don't need to do this. And you shouldn't be doing this. So imagine there's a line there, and while you're doing this, at this point, part of your aim is to keep your shoulders on that line. So if you've got an appropriate piece of wallpaper or painting, so someone's painted a strip on your wall or something like that, you can line yourself up along with that. And the same thing here. If you watch my shoulders, I just bring my foot in, my shoulders stay at the same height. I don't do this. You shouldn't need to do that because there's hardly any weight left in this leg. And all you're really doing is drawing the foot in, or think of it contracting the leg and then expanding it. The shoulders don't have a role in that, apart from the overall role of the rest of the body, which is to maintain an aligned, stable posture. If I do raise my shoulders, I instantly lose the root and start to wobble around. And then on the other side. And then raising your toes and your heel. I think thinking of that pressing down, practicing that, just means that the planting of your foot, so when you put your foot down on the floor, it's just that much more complete. Stepping in. So we don't want to step on the floor, we want to step through the floor. And then taking a series of steps forwards or backwards. And in the other direction. Good, shake out. So there's a legend really of the old Shaolin temples where the sort of legendary place where the Chinese martial art began, where if you'd entered as a novice, you'd go in through the gates and it'd be years there training. But you had to leave through this passageway, and the passageway was lined with rice paper. You get on the bottom of macaroons and things like that. And you had to be able to walk down the passageway on the rice paper without creasing or tearing it. So the planting of the foot was the final barrier, shall we say, the final test for you to leave the temple and graduate, as it were, to be able to actually step below or get a sense of stepping through the ground. Think about the difference between walking on a soft carpet and a shiny kitchen floor. You walk on the soft carpet and you don't feel as though you're going to slip over. You walk onto the kitchen floor and you're sliding around. The harder the surface, the more likely you are to slip and to lose traction. Polar bears have these really massive but very soft paws. Yeah, I mean they're very powerful, but it's to enable the paw to connect with slippery surfaces that they move around on better. So same thing here. So it's a useful exercise. Okay, so have your right foot forwards. Bird folds its wings. When we do this exercise, I talked about the opening and closing of the choir here. There's a similar thing here where your arm meets your chest. There's another one of those little valleys. When this happens, it becomes very shallow and very wide. And when we turn in, you can really push your fingers quite a long way in. And then fisherman cast the net. Pushing away. And then pulse the monkey. Sink back. Turn. Wait until the hands are in position. Move forwards. Notice how close your hands come to each other here. It's almost like just for a moment, as though they could be about to hold a ball between them. And take note of where the front hand is, because when you come back and the rear hand turns into the front, you want it to arrive in the same place. And then, because we're turning, the knee will be pulled in if we're not careful, but we can use that to help us move the foot. Okay, check. Have your left foot forwards, and bird folds its wings. And then fisherman cast net. And pushing a wave. And post the monkey. And step in. Okay. Rubbing your hands together. And tapping. Over your head, neck. One shoulder. Arm. Other side. Pinch your back. Your hips. On your belly. Yep. Good. So, going back to parallel stance. And let your hips sink, embrace tiger, and return to mountain. One more time. And stand. Check out. Lovely. Thank you, everybody. Have any questions before we finish? Oh my goodness.